Okay. Hello, everyone. So I'm Jake Claro. I'm the Farm to Plate Director here at the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, and welcome to our virtual 10th annual gathering. Things will be a little different this year, so please give us your grace and your forgiveness as we might run into some technical challenges along the way, but hopefully not too many. And just welcome and thank you for joining us here, and a tremendous amount of gratitude for the work and resolve that everyone here has shown in the last year. I know there's been a tremendous amount of upheaval and changes required in our personal and our professional lives this year due to the COVID pandemic, and it's really been quite tremendous and inspiring. Oh. All right. I don't know if I was just muted. So I'll start over. Hold on one second. Okay, great. We can hear you. Okay. So there we go. There's the first technical hurdle is me thinking I may have been muted. So thank you again. And yeah, it's just been a real inspiration to see all the work that's been happening over the last year, despite all the challenges that we've seen. And so yes, so we will begin here. Now, much of today and tomorrow is focused on the next 10 years of strengthening our food system together, but we cannot meaningfully work together in an inclusive way towards a better future without acknowledging the difficult truths of our history. And that includes the dispossession of Abenaki land and committing ourselves to rectifying the injustices of white colonization of Indigenous peoples. So let's start first then with a land acknowledgement to the Abenaki people. So we acknowledge that the land we are on is the traditional and unceded territory of the Abenaki people, who have had a continual and enduring presence here in Adakina, the Abenaki word for homeland, since time immemorial. That presence and care for the land continues to this day. We have a responsibility to help make this truth visible, to support efforts towards Indigenous sovereignty and well-being, and dismantle the legacies of colonialism here in Vermont. And before going into depth on the next strategic plan and our agenda for our 2 days, I want to devote time to another difficult truth. In addition to our food system resting on stolen Indigenous land, it is also a system built upon the exploitation of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And institutional racism to this day further disenfranchises BIPOC communities, farmers, and food workers. We know a just and equitable food system and society cannot exist without dismantling institutional racism and the culture of white supremacy. One moment. Yet, despite knowing this, the Farm to Plate Backbone team missed an important opportunity a year ago that I do want to talk about, to send a strong signal of commitment to addressing racism through the next strategic plan and iteration of the Farm to Plate network. From the very start of the process to develop the next strategic plan, which began with the writing of product, market, and issue briefs, with the first batch that were published in January and the second batch that is being published now, we should have had a dedicated racial equity brief. In early summer, we recognized our mistake and we reached out to Olivia Pena to lead the development of the racial equity brief, which is now in process of being written. Olivia is a graduate of UVM's Food System Graduate Program, the Food Solutions New England Leadership Institute, and she is also the founder of the Vermont Relief Collective, which aims to create a network and affinity platform for BIPOC involved in 4 areas of land, environment, agriculture, and food systems. So while we hope to have the brief ready by the gathering, in hindsight, our expectations were not realistic given the condensed timeline our authors have been operating under, and of course, the complexity of the issue. So more time is needed to get greater representation and input from the BIPOC community before presenting and discussing the recommendations of the brief with a wider audience. Once the racial equity brief is complete, we will hold a dedicated convening to present the findings and recommendations, and in turn chart the course for how the Farm to Plate Network can collectively address racial equity and systemic racism in the food system over the next 10 years. And lastly, as it relates to some of our plans and initiatives around racial justice and equity, we would like you to know of an anti-racism training led by the DC-based Service to Justice that we are co-hosting in partnership with the Farm-Based Education Network, the Vermont Farm to School Network, and the Northeast Farm to School Collaborative. So the training, and you'll see a link now being posted into the chat where you can sign up to express interest. So this training will be held virtually over 4 days in January, and there is an opportunity for a 6-month group coaching cohort for a smaller group of the participants in the training. So please let us know if you are interested in the training by filling out the form linked in the chat, and please do that by November 23rd. And due to limited availability, filling out the form is not a guarantee of participating in the training. So despite having certainly made some missteps along the way in developing the plan and knowing there are many challenges that lie ahead, we are optimistic and excited about what we can accomplish together in the next 10 years. And we do believe the new strategic plan is representative of shared values and vision for a just, viable, and sustainable food system. So where are things at with the strategic planning process? And what can we share with you all to this point? So let me change my slides here. Some formatting issues. So here we go. Here's the full timeline, start to finish. And let me just make sure everyone, okay. So it seems like ages ago, back in July of 2019, we started this process in partnership with the Agency of Agriculture, the development of our new strategic plan. And that started with 23 briefs, 2 to 4 page documents summarizing current conditions, gaps and bottlenecks, and recommendations covering products, markets, and issues. And they were developed over the summer, fall, and early winter of 2019 and presented to the legislature in January of 2020 as the Vermont Agriculture and Food System Plan 2020 Part 1. And so that's the cover of that document is the image on the left of the slide. And for those of you wondering why Part 1 was presented in January, it fulfilled a legislative request from the Senate as part of Act 83, an act relating to agricultural development. And for those who want to know even more about Act 83, please direct your inquiries to Abby Willard at the Agency of Agriculture. And I'm only joking, but if you are interested to know more about kind of the ins and outs of that process, please do let us know. And the image on the right is just an example of one of those briefs. That's the dairy brief, the first page of it, if you're curious. So going back to our timeline. Since that time, a second set of 31 briefs have been in development and are now being posted to our website on a rolling basis as they are finalized and formatted. Of course, COVID has introduced some delays in this process. And so what started off in November of 2019 has continued into the present. But we're almost there. And in conjunction with finalizing the briefs over the summer, we launched a stakeholder engagement process comprised of a survey to the public, asking people what they value about the food system, what challenges are on their mind, what they think is working well. We also organized small stakeholder focus groups with various agricultural industries, such as dairy, cheese, beef, specialty food, and more, and interest groups, such as farm to school, farmers markets, and watershed alliances to gauge, and those sessions were designed to gauge growth opportunities and rank and prioritize specific recommendations from the briefs that had been developed to that point. So as the timeline indicates, nearly 1,200 Vermonters participated in the public survey, which I will share in a moment. And this leaves us in the home stretch of integrating the stakeholder input into the plan to finish writing, design, and printing of it, and then officially present the plan to the legislature in February of 2021. So the plan will include a vision statement, which I will share today, 17 goals which connect to the economic, environmental, and equity and access outcomes defined by the Farm to Plate enabling legislation, measurable objectives for each goal, and high priority strategies that have been developed through the briefs. And all 54 briefs will be included as an appendix to the plan. Once the plan is released, implementation will begin. And that includes a process of restructuring the Farm to Plate network to reflect new strategic priorities and the best ways to leverage our collective capacity and resources. Also, in the spring of 2021, we will publish a 10-year retrospective of the Farm to Plate network, highlighting accomplishments of the network in the first 10 years and featuring the next iteration of the local food count that will complete the accounting for changes in local food purchasing in Vermont from 2010 to 2020. So we're very excited about that, and I think it's also just important for us all to remember that we've been at this for quite a while now, for a decade. So with this new beginning, we have a very strong foundation to start from. So let's take a look at a few highlights from the public survey. I think it's informative on its own to you and your organizations, but what we heard from respondents also influenced the vision statement of the new strategic plan. So here we go. So first off, overwhelmingly, almost 97% of people said that local farming and food is extremely important to them. And I don't think there was actually anyone who actually said it's not. There were some very qualified responses in the sort of somewhat important or no. So, I think probably this is obvious to many of us, but I think it just continues to show the importance that local farming, food and farming has in Vermont, and is just more evidence to kind of continue on with resolve into the next 10 years. And then in terms of what people said they value, clearly supporting the health and vitality of the local economy, farms and the working landscape and community, freshness, taste, and quality of food, sustainability, organic, trust and transparency in the supply chain were all values that arose amongst the 1,200 respondents very, very strongly, and I think very clearly in what people, in how they responded to this question of what they value about the local food system. And so again, I think, this clearly is further affirmation of the work that's been happening and further affirmation of its importance to continue. We also asked people about, there we go. We also asked people, how has COVID-19 affected your views and what you value about the food system? Has it changed your views? And so the the majority response was yes, COVID-19 has made them think differently about the value of local farming and food production and the food system as a whole. There were responses that were no's, but the majority of those said that it really reinforced, what they already valued about the local food system. And then here's a small sample of some of the things that people said in terms of how COVID has changed their views. So that first one on the left-hand side, yes, I am sourcing as much food locally as possible, especially since there have been breakdowns in the food supply chain at large stores. And the fact that COVID is present at food plants makes me want to know who is handling my food along the way. And I can say that particular quote is very representative of a number of responses that we saw. So people clearly saw, a difference in availability at their typical places where they would shop. And there was just this increased notion about, wanting to know where their food is coming from and the transparency of the food system and the supply chain. The second one, I heard someone say that a pandemic is like an X-ray. It helps us see more clearly the things that were already there. I already valued small farms and direct purchasing, but this seems even more important now. So that's a good example of someone who, we had counted as a no, but it's a very kind of qualified no, and COVID reinforcing values that they had. And then the last one, I feel more strongly about local food and farming. We are a powerful little state, and it's time to build on that power. Plus, it builds community. With community, you build that strength too. And then we asked, what's working well? And I can just say that really the summary of that is local agriculture and food systems. And there was certainly different variations on this theme. People noticing more variety available, lauding CSAs and farmers markets, the networking between farms, organizations, and communities and food shelves was something that came up a number of times. The quality of the food produced. All of these speak to an obvious appreciation to the work of Vermont farmers and to all of you in your work supporting the Vermont food system. And then lastly, perceived challenges. So here's kind of the top couple of things that really emerged. There was very nuanced comments about affordability, people seeing the underlying socioeconomics as the issue with access. Many comments around wanting to see more local in their grocery store, even with an increase in direct purchasing. There was also, I would say, very nuanced and acute awareness on the importance of dairy to the state and agriculture in Vermont, and questions about how to support it and make it more viable into the future. I would honestly say that this is probably some of the more nuanced commentary that I've seen from the public on dairy in quite some time. So I was actually encouraged by that. And as you can see, there's climate change was absolutely on people's minds. The cost of doing business, struggle of farmers to make a living, the recognition of competing with an industrial, globalized food system, and access to land were some other key issues that people were concerned about. So there's been a lot of really good input, and we've taken all that input from the public. And we've channeled that into our vision statement. So I'm really happy to get to this point of now being able to share the vision statement that will be in the next strategic plan. And this is a culmination of this public survey, of our stakeholder sessions, the common themes throughout the briefs, input from farm to plate leadership, executive directors from food system organizations across the state. So just a lot has gone into this statement. And so here goes. As people have noted, as I've read this a few times in the past, I'll try to put on my best sort of David Attenborough voice as I read through this. So here we go. I'm going to read it out loud. It's, I think, nice to hear this, and you can obviously read along. So here is our vision statement for the next strategic plan. We will create a future where Vermont's agricultural economy is defined by human well-being, environmental sustainability, equity, trust, collaboration, and ingenuity. A future built on Vermont agricultural traditions of neighbor helping neighbor, hard work, self-determination, and community values. Financially sustainable farms and food businesses of all sizes will thrive across Vermont, serving our state and region with a diversity of products available everywhere, from local farmers markets and restaurants to school cafeterias to the shelves of New England's grocery stores. Access to capital, land, infrastructure, education, policy, and technical assistance will be sufficient and equitable, so new generations of farmers and food entrepreneurs can build on the strengths of the past and bring forward new ideas, perspectives, and energy. All of those who produce, process, sell, and distribute our food will feel at home in Vermont, earn livable wages, and have an excellent, economically secure quality of life. And next slide here. We envision a working landscape where agricultural soils are protected and respected for their ability to sustain us in good times and hard times, in which farming and food production generate clean water, clean air, healthy soils, and ecological diversity. All Vermont residents will share responsibility for reducing food waste and managing nutrients for highest and best use. Agricultural stewardship will help our rural and urban areas work in concert to adapt to the changing climate. Land stewardship that benefits the health and resilience of the land and communities will be publicly recognized and rewarded and cultivate deep appreciation and connection with the land. We envision a food system in which there are no social, cultural, or infrastructure barriers to obtaining and enjoying local food. All Vermont residents will be well nourished and have easy access to healthy and culturally appropriate food. Race, age, gender, ethnic heritage, birthplace, and formal education do not determine who can participate in the food system. From owning a food system business to enjoying the fruits of the land, Vermont's food system will be inclusive, safe, and welcoming to all. Okay, so there it is. And I have to admit, it is strange to be presenting this kind of in a virtual setting and not feeling fully the energy of the room as we would if we were together at the gathering. I think, I don't know what kind of abilities you have to post in the comments or the chat at this stage, but please post away. And we'll have more time, obviously, to discuss this and kind of digest it as we move ahead. So for the remainder of today and tomorrow, I really want people to keep this vision in mind. With our panel that's going to follow immediately after this, we'll hear individual stories that I think not only speak to what has been an extraordinary year of challenges, adaptations, and inspiration, but I think they also provide us seeds of the vision that are already starting to grow. And in the breakout sessions that are going to start at 2:45, we're going to familiarize ourselves with various briefs and start to work out specific pathways for working together and making this vision a reality. So I think it's really a part of everything that we'll be doing today and obviously into the future. Lastly, before I leave the spotlight here, I want to say that there are many thanks in order for many things. So thank you to the full Farm to Plate team. So Sarah Danley, Lydia Pitkin, Kelly Notterman, Shane Rogers, our executive director, Ellen Kaler, just a tremendous amount of work that everyone has put in, not only to making the gathering possible, but the strategic plan. To the Farm to Plate leadership, all of our chairs of our working groups and task forces and cross-cutting teams, their commitment throughout this has been just tremendous. To the Agency of Agriculture for their support and unwavering dedication and partnering and helping us with the strategic plan, and also just general support for Farm to Plate. It's really tremendous the amount of work that they've put in. They've been with us on Friday team calls every week for a year now, which is really extraordinary. To our funders for their support, and our sponsors as well. And then to the legislature, they have shown continued support for the first decade, and they've given us their commitment to another 10 years that we're tremendously thankful for. And lastly, thanks to all of you. Really, none of this is anything without all the work that you do, and the passion and dedication and expertise that you provided. So just a huge thanks for everything that you put in, and enjoy the next 2 days in this kind of new virtual realm. So with that, I will bid you adieu for now, and we'll move on to what will be our plenary panel. And just a reminder, as when that ends, we'll have roughly a 10 to 15 minute break for folks then to get to their breakout sessions. All right, thanks all.
Hi, everybody. Just give us a second. We're getting folks' screens turned on. Hold on.
Jake, can you hear me? I mean, Shane, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
It's when I go to start my video, it's saying you can't start your video because the host has stopped it.
All right, technical difficulty number 2. Hold on one second while we get that figured out. There we go. Hi, Kat.
Hi, Jake, or Shane.
All right, there we go. We got screens popping up. Look at all these lovely faces. So as folks start getting their screens up, I'm going to get us started here. So first off, thank you to everybody who's joining us for the gathering today. We're really excited to have you here. For those who don't know me, my name is Shane Rogers, and I'm the Farm to Plate Communications Manager at the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund. We are really excited for this plenary discussion today, and we have a great group of folks who are going to be joining us to share stories of adaptation and transition and what those say about the future of our food system here in Vermont. So speaking today, we're going to be having Erica Lynch of Babette's Table, Amber Arnold and Naomi Moody of the Susu Community Farm and Susu Healing Collective, Andrew Peterson of Peterson Quality Malts, Kat Buxton of Grow More, Waste Less, and the Vermont Healthy Soils Coalition. Each panelist brings a unique perspective to this timely and important discussion, and we are really grateful for their time. So thank you to all the panelists for being here. Just for some quick logistics, for the first hour, each panelist is going to share their story, and for the last half an hour, they will be answering questions from attendees. So for all of those in attendance, if you have any questions, please ask them via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we will take those questions and ask them at the end to the panelists. Also, please feel free to use the chat function for all your affirmations and celebrations, because I am sure that all these stories are going to be great and inspiring. So without further ado, I am pleased to present Erica Lynch to kick us off for this plenary discussion. Erica, go ahead.
All right, thank you so much. Hi all, my name is Erica Lynch, and I'm the owner of Babette's Table, a woman-owned and operated European-style charcuterie company that handcrafts salami, saucisson sec, and whole muscle dry-cured meats in our own USDA-inspected facility in Waitsfield, Vermont. If you just bear with me, I'm not the best at technology, but I'm going to share my screen and hope everything works and start my slideshow with you. Let's see here. Oh no, see what I mean? Okay, I'm gonna do this maybe without slides. Let's see. You just give me, I'm so sorry. I thought I was all set, and now here I am. I can't escape and exit my full screen. There we go. Okay. Let me start back over. Oh my goodness. Well, hopefully I will be the only one that does this, and everybody else will be so smooth. That's usually the plan. All right, first of all, I want to thank Farm to Plate Network for asking me to be a part of this presentation today. As you can probably tell, or if you've ever spoken with me before, I'm not originally from Vermont, but I am grateful to be a part of a vibrant and creative community of small businesses in this state. So thanks to my fellow presenters for your work in and with the Vermont agricultural community. First of all, I'd like to introduce you to my wife and me. We're both former teachers who feel passionate about the importance of building community. I also want to introduce you to Rose. She is the one standing in front of the cart of salami on the left. Those are my two quality control people also on your left, standing with me in our room. These people make up Babette's Table. Our mission is to build strong relationships with our local family-run farms and to provide a product that authentically conveys a sense of place and that brings people together. To learn my craft, I traveled to Gascony, France, and interned with master butchers Kate Hill, who's on the left in a purple vest, and Dominique Chapillard, who has a very impressive mustache on the right. There I learned about the importance of interconnected food systems. Dominique is a third-generation butcher, and he championed local agriculture despite the pressure to industrialize. Over the last 10 to 15 years, France moved towards more and more industrialization of their meat processing. and the local abattoir or slaughterhouse was going to be shut down, forcing farmers to truck their animals 2 to 3 hours away to a larger slaughterhouse. Dominique and other local farmers worked together to buy the local abattoir and run it collectively as a cooperative. They all pooled their money together to pay the workers at the slaughterhouse, and each farmer had a day that was designated to their farm for slaughter each week. Even though these farmers were essentially competitors at the local farmers markets, they worked together to ensure that they knew personally who was slaughtering their animals, and they worked together to keep all of their money local. Dominique also had a close relationship with the people who raised his animals because they were his brothers. Dominique and his brothers, they not only did they raise all of the hogs on their property, but they also raised all of the food that they fed their pigs on their property. And then the family processed the pork and they sold it directly to consumers at local farmers markets. As meat processing becomes more and more industrialized, from raising our animals to the processing and packaging of their products, I base my ethos on what I learned in France. That first of all, even small businesses can benefit when they cooperate together. Secondly, your process defines your product. And lastly, it's essential to know your farmers personally. I remember Dominique emphatically repeating the cardinal rule of good charcuterie. Erica, you must know your farmers. Our ability to thrive as a business depends on an incredibly supportive and cooperative agricultural community. We've been able to build our business thanks to mentorships and structural supports from Robin Morris and Bill Cavanaugh at the former Mad River Food Hub, my work with Jacob Finsen and his former business, Artisan Meats of Vermont, the Center for an Agricultural Economy, Farm Connects, the Waitsfield Farmers Market, Shelburne Farms, small locally run specialized food shops, and our consumers who have been and continue to be extremely loyal. I started my business at the Mad River Food Hub, a collective of small businesses that worked out of the same processing plant. I had mentors there, and I was able to start and build my company because I had people who were willing to help me learn HACCP and food safety planning, business planning, and food costing. Without mentors like Robin Morris, Bill Cavanaugh, and Jacob Finsen, and without a space that I didn't have to build myself, I could have never started a charcuterie business. In addition, I found that the marketing I received from local businesses and from my presence at the Waitsfield Farmers Market helped me make connections that continue to allow my business to grow. Our farmers are the foundation of my business. We only use local pork from family farms in our products. We just received word this week that our Saucisson Sec and our Pinocchiona salami were finalists in the Good Food Awards. I share this because I believe that our products are a direct reflection of the high quality pork that we get from our farmers. We work closely with Pegasus Meats, Snug Valley Farm, Von Trapp Farmstead, and PT Farm. Our farmers are proud of their humane animal husbandry practices and their commitment to sustainable agriculture. I've been to all of our farms. I know the farmers and their families, and I work closely with them to plan our year. Some of these farms, not only do I buy pork from them, but we also make products for them. One farmer has told me that he wanted us to make his sausage because we make our own spice kits, often with spices that we toast ourselves, and will list what spices are present in our products. Bigger processing plants buy pre-made spice kits and where ingredients don't have to be listed. Often when Phelan, one of the owners of Pegasus Meats, is dropping off meat, we joke about our constant exchange of money. He stores meat in our freezer, we buy his meat for salami, and then we make sausage for him that he then sells directly to consumers. It's sometimes a dizzying cycle, but it's one that I'm proud to be a part of. When I text Ben Notterman of Snug Valley Farm he'll probably be on his tractor or doing some other important task on the farm, but he will always text me back. He'll help me find the meat or back fat that I need for my salami, and he knows that I will always do my best to fit his processing needs into my processing schedule. This symbiotic relationship stands in stark contrast with an industrial model. This relationship works because it's extremely personal. I think that the crisis of this pandemic and the fragility highlights and spotlights the fragility of an industrial food system, and it has triggered a renewed interest in local products. This year has been one of disruption marked by reactivity. When the pandemic hit, I was impressed by how well all of my colleagues pivoted together to meet the demands of consumers. Initially, our salami sales plummeted with the closure of restaurants and businesses. Thankfully, many of our farmers asked me to continue to make their sausage with their own meat to sell directly to their consumers. We saw a shift towards online sales, and in the process, many local producers realized that we were all stronger together. Many crafted Vermont gift baskets and asked for our products to be included. One of our local stores allowed us to purchase shipping through them and highlighted our products on their online store for consumers to buy. The shipping arrangement benefited us both because the more they shipped, the more that we could work towards better shipping prices. When the Department of Agriculture gave us a spot in the Good Food Virtual Mercantile, I can't tell you how many supportive comments I saw between all of the Vermont businesses present. Small businesses in Vermont are powerful promoters of Vermont-made products because we all know who makes them. The more we all commit to providing food with integrity and with transparency, the more that benefits the whole Vermont food community. I believe that the future of the Vermont food system is a bright one. To grow Vermont businesses, we need to intentionally cultivate cooperative systems. While industrial models focus solely on competition, our model can be one of collaboration. Even though this is at work across the state now, I think there is the potential to create even more vibrant ways for producers to connect. I can imagine Vermont strengthening its own artisanal food guilds like the Farm to Plate Network, like our Vermont Cheesemakers Council, like Slow Food Vermont. Strengthening these would allow members to continue to connect and network, and they could help new businesses market through shared ethos and shared standards. In addition, I think we need to support and educate entrepreneurs. One way we can do this is to attract people willing to create and run cooperative food spaces that incubate new businesses. These spaces can be incredibly helpful for new business owners because it can provide mentorship with business planning and cut down on new business overhead costs. I saw this in action in France in the Basque region at a cooperative processing plant that housed multiple butchers, a shared curing facility, and they had even a small retail store at the front with a shared brand. Also, my work with the Butcher's Manifesto, which is based in Copenhagen, I learned the importance of apprenticeships in cultivating artisanal expertise within a community. Many of the European butchers I have met and worked with go through a process of stages where they study for several years with different butchers to acquire a certificate of mastery. This carries weight and prestige. Marjorie, a young woman I worked with at the Chapillards in France, apprenticed with them throughout high school, took a test, and then became a master butcher. She continues to work for them today. I'd like to think that someday Vermont could create a system of apprenticeship for artisans that benefits both small businesses and those committed to learning these trades. We could enrich Vermont's technical education, potentially with collaboration between high schools and businesses, and we can make Vermont a nexus of intergenerational skill and knowledge. In an age of industrialized food, Vermont offers an alternative, and I'm glad to be a part of that. We have the ability to work with our partners face to face. At this point, we have to wear masks, but we work with our partners every step of the way. This makes a difference, not just in the flavor of our products, but in the sustainability of all of our endeavors. When we work together, we can continue to build a thriving Vermont food system that ripples beyond state borders, and it can even become a blueprint for other states to follow. Again, thanks so much for all of your time today. Thanks so much for listening. I appreciate all of you who work in the agriculture community and support of it as well. I hope you all continue to be well and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erica. What a wonderful offering. Definitely showing how we are certainly stronger here in Vermont because of those collaborations that we have. So to move on to our next speakers, I'm excited to present to everybody Amber Arnold and Naomi Moody of the Susu Community Farm in Brattleboro. So without further ado, I'm going to spotlight you all, and you are good to go.
Thank you, Shane. We are really grateful to be here. Really loved hearing from Erica. Thank you so much for sharing about your beautiful meats. I'm going to share our screen. Is that, okay, wait, I need to do the presentation thing if I can find the button. Here it is. Okay, great. So my name is Amber, and I am one of the co-stewards of the Susu Community Farm in Brattleboro, Vermont.
And my name is Naomi Moody, and I am also a steward of the Susu Community Farm in Brattleboro, Vermont. We are a BIPOC-centered healing collective and future farm in Southern Vermont. And one of the values that we hold sacred at the heart of our collective and our organization is reverence for the land as a sovereign being. And it's that reverence which keeps us connected to our lineages, meaning who we are and who we come from. And it's that reverence that inspires us to find ways to remain in right relationship with those lineages, even as we find ourselves in spaces like these where perhaps those lineages tend to go unacknowledged. And one of the ways that we practice that value is by honoring and acknowledging the energies that helped to get us here, to give our ancestors a seat at the proverbial table. And so I want to acknowledge how we are held today by the elements and the energies of this land and this place. And I want to honor and acknowledge our ancestors, both bloodline ancestors and those of the collective, ancestors who paved the way for the work that we do, ancestors like Harriet Tubman, Booker T. Whatley, Fannie Lou Hamer, and Daisy Turner, just to name a few. And I want to honor and acknowledge the original people of the Abenaki and their project, the Atui Project, which offers us the possibility of learning how to be in right relationship with the land and the original people of the land. So our mission is to create spaces for Black and Indigenous people of color to come together with the land and to heal. Our mission is to build a culture of liberation so that our people have safer spaces to heal, not only from the trauma that we're experiencing in this time and this space, but the trauma of our lineages that have been passed down and onto us. It's important to acknowledge that we're the stewards of that trauma and that we have been entrusted with the responsibility to begin healing from it. And it's important to name that just coming to the land is not healing in and of itself. We're not just talking about farming or food systems, we're talking about history. In my bones, I carry the stories of people who were taken from their land, and in being taken, lost language, tradition, culture. And in my bones, I carry the stories of people whose land was taken from them, and with it, language, tradition, culture. So when I or some of us who are like me come to the land, there are all these stories in our bones that we have to contend with. And the truth is, these stories have bled into the soil. So when I hold the soil in my hand, I'm holding the truth of our shared history, so that I'm never just tending gardens or plots. I'm tending to grief and to loss And I can't tend to that. That is why Susu is so important and why our mission is to create safer, affirming, culturally relevant spaces for people to come together and heal, to reclaim that culture, those languages, that tradition. Particularly people of color, particularly Black and Indigenous people of color, because our healing needs to be centered and our cultures need to be reclaimed. But we're also building a space for everyone to contend with the stories they carry within, for our allies to come and learn and grow alongside of us. Because if we're truly talking about creating community and building a liberatory culture of collective care, we can't do this alone. We need each other.
Thank you, Naomi. So we have a quote that really is kind of central to how we started the farm. And it's a quote from ancestor Fannie Lou Hamer that says, "If you give a hungry man food, he will eat it. But if you give him land, he will grow his own food." And so when COVID happened, we had just opened our studio for the Susu Healing Collective, and we had to shut down pretty quickly. And what we wanted to do was really find a way with everything that was happening with COVID, with our people being murdered, with all of the racism and trauma that we experience on a daily basis, to be able to give our people access to foods that are relevant and that heal their bodies, and that is something that we see as a birthright and not a commodity that people should have to work towards to get. And so we had started a GoFundMe to raise money to purchase CSAs for BIPOC families in southern Vermont. And we very quickly reached our goal of being able to purchase those CSAs. And as the money kept coming in, what we were thinking is, like, there's only so much CSAs that we can purchase. Like, most of the farms that are available are, their CSAs are gone, their shares are booked up because of the, scarcity thing that was happening. And so we decided, which is something that we had been talking about prior, was purchasing land to create our own farm that is a BIPOC centered farm where we can grow our own food, and that this free CSA project could be something that was forever, and that our people could also have access to programming that supported them. And like, how do you grow food? How do you connect with the land, and these things that Naomi was sharing. So that's, now we're in the process of creating this farm and this center of healing for people of color and multiracial community in Vermont. And so we wanted to also share about some of the problems that we've seen just being part of the food system in this new way as an organization. And, as people who have eaten food our whole lives, we've always been in relationship with food. And so before I read this quote, or this statistic, one thing that I want to share is that, like, there's all these different phases that happen. And I think it's really important to think about where we are right now. And so what we see in Vermont is there's these phases of diversity. And when we think about diversity, what are we diverting from? We're trying to avoid and bring Black and brown people in so that we don't have to talk about the whiteness and the white supremacy and the racism that is inherent. And then we move into inclusion. And when we talk about inclusion, what are we including to? We are including to a system that is very Eurocentric, that is very racist, that is centering a very specific narrative and story. And then beyond that, we have equity and eventually liberation. And liberation is what we look towards, a way of being where all of us can thrive and all of our voices and who we are is central. But what we've seen in Vermont is that focus in the food system on inclusion, where white folks are, they're the leaders in these systems. They're the people with the power. They're the gatekeepers. They're the ones with the money and the funds. And where Black and brown people are asked or invited to be included in these systems, but they're really not central to, how we do things. Our stories aren't told. We're very invisibilized, and we're put in these kind of lowly positions of just, this perpetual thing. And so for us, this is a real problem, because what we believe is that BIPOC voices need to be central in the change that is happening. Our stories, our lineages, are the wisdom and the ecological knowledge that our ancestors have bestowed upon us, and that our communities have been, you know, sustainably protecting and healing with the land for so many years. That needs to be centered in how we do things. And so one of the things that, you know, is probably not shocking at this point is that 98% of farmable land is owned by white people, and that BIPOC have been systematically displaced, dispossessed, and otherwise excluded from these treasures by centuries via the appropriation of their lands, disconnected now for generations from their landed birthright. BIPOC are disproportionately impacted by health inequities, debilitating illness, death, and trauma, which are all preventable.
So what do we do? In this moment, we are developing and have developed programming to address some of these inequities. Just the sheer act of us looking for land is revolutionary, right? Thinking about that very small 2% nationwide is even smaller here in Vermont. So for the purpose of having the farm is to be able to provide what we call a box of resilience, which is our free CSA box for BIPOC, and it builds on the, you know, the legacy of Booker T. Watley, who innovated the CSA model with his community membership program. And then, of course, we're thinking about a program or planning a program called the Youth to Liberation Pipeline, which will be healing centered spaces and programs for our youth who, you know, who are at risk and who, as an alternative to the mental health system. And we're planning on our farm storyteller gardens, which are cultural heritage gardens that will reflect the populations who come and join us, the people and their traditions, earth-based ancestral practices of different peoples from different places, including our own. And then we have right now many workshops and classes in our trauma conscious liberation school, which is political education for BIPOC, but also white folks, and also centering under-resourced folks and programs for over-resourced folks. And it's about laying the groundwork, like preparing for building a liberated culture here in Vermont. And right now we're leading unbodying white supremacy workshops, and we have like cohorts that are predominantly white, and we have cohorts that are affinity groups for people of color, and we have Mindful of Race, which is another program, and also the Radical Community Herbal Allyship, which is an herbal education program for people of color to reclaim the healing wisdom of their ancestors in relation to plant medicine.
So I think we have no time left, I think, because I think our thing ends at 1:30. I think we've spoken for 15 minutes, but I guess just to kind of close, you know, I'll just say that like something that is really important to us and that we're working towards with the projects and some of the other things that we're doing around the state is to really be part of building a true community, a true statewide community where all of these people and all of these organizations that are involved in the land and food system can come together and really work together to create truly equitable, truly liberated, truly thriving systems where all of our voices are important and are heard and are central, and there is no one, you know, leader or group that's, you know, leading the way or trailblazers, but where we are all being heard. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Naomi and Amber. Let me get the spotlights off here. And for bringing that message of collective liberation to the forefront of this gathering. It's a really important one that we keep at the forefront of these discussions throughout the rest of this gathering, but also throughout the rest of our lives as we do this work. So with that, we're going to move to Andrew Peterson of Peterson Quality Malts for him to share his story with us.
Hey, everybody. All right. Well, let's see. My turn to see if I could do screen sharing here. Share screen. That looks like it worked, right? Slideshow. There we go. Yeah, hey everybody, I'm Andrew Peterson from Peterson Quality Malt here in Charlotte, Vermont. First, Amber, Naomi, that was an amazing presentation and really powerful and inspiring. So thank you so much for that. My hope is that we can get to be more helpful as time goes by and be more inclusive than we are. We certainly tried to be, but that's amazing information. So for my presentation here, I usually start with describing what a malt house is, because that's usually where the question is, so what do you do? So what is malt? Any cereal grain can be malted. So we're growing mostly barley, but we also do wheat and rye, triticale, trying to get some buckwheat going, spelt. And what happens is you're converting the stored starches and sugars that the seed would normally use to grow and turn into a plant. And we're converting that into sugars that the brewers and distillers use. When you're thinking about a beer, the color and flavor and sugar are the main things you're getting from the malt. So lots of stuff. And the other question we always get is when you're talking about like malt vinegar, malted milk balls, even Ovaltine, malt and baking. Yeah, it's all the same thing. And it's been going on for a long time. Prior to having refined sugar available in stores, the sugar and malt was where most people would get things from baking. The other question we always get is, oh, how are the hops doing? Well, we don't do hops. Those are the other main ingredient in beer. But just to give you an idea of the amount, the volume, in a typical recipe, so I've got a small recipe here, well, there might be 360 pounds of malt. There is less than 2 pounds of hops. So when you're drinking a beer, it's mostly malt. Then the finished product, a lot of people who seen like liquid malts, we're actually providing seeds. So this is kind of what it looks like. You've got different colors, different roasts, and that's where your flavor differences come in. So when you're having a chocolate porter, it's not because they put chocolate in there, it's because we took the malt and we roasted it the same way you'd roast coffee, and you start developing these chocolate and coffee kind of flavors. So that's who we are. I came to this because I wanted to have a brewery of my own in Vermont that use local ingredients. When I started out, I did some market research by going to some of my favorite breweries, tasting rooms, and just randomly asking people, hey, you love that Vermont beer, but do you know where the ingredients came from? And everybody said no. And I said, well, do you care? And everybody said no. And I went ahead and started a malt house anyway. And that was, almost 10 years ago now. And people are starting to think about what's in their beer. Brewing in Vermont is really big. So, almost $400 million in economic impact. That was 2017. I haven't updated that slide in a while. I'm sure it's way over that at this point. And we're talking about, over 21 million pounds of malt used that stays in the state. Almost all of that malt comes from the Pacific Northwest or Europe. And last year, craft brewing in Vermont surpassed skiing for the top tourism dollars in the state. So it's a good sized industry, and we're getting there. So when I started, I thought, oh, the easiest thing in the world is going to be to get farmers to grow grains for me. And that turned out to be the hardest thing. I was thinking with, issues with dairy failing, people will be looking for things. But growing grains in Vermont is not as simple as I'd like it to be. So Vermont was once known as the breadbasket of New England. This is where most things came from in the 1800s. You see that second statistic there. There's over 160,000 acres actively farmed in Vermont now, but yes, less than 2,000 acres are used for human consumption grains. Now, as of 2 years ago, that was less than 1,000 acres. That extra 1,000 is what we've been doing. So we've doubled that, but we're still, a tiny percentage of the land in Vermont. Farmers in Vermont also, they've been growing grain for feed. So we're seeing that they've got the basic experience, but being able to work with UVM Extension and Heather Darby's team has just been amazing to figure out how do you grow well in Vermont. It's a small state, but we've got lots of microclimates going on. Climate change is vastly affecting how things perform. So it's been an interesting road. The other problem is infrastructure. So once you're harvesting these grains, where does it go? How do you sort them? How do you get the quality that you need? And what do you do with things that don't work that well? So how do we kind of fit into the agricultural picture? I see us as a direct benefit to agriculture in Vermont because we're working with farms, particularly a lot of these farms that it's next generation farmers that would like to take over the farm, but they're not going to be in dairy. So we're part of that solution as saying, well, we can get some small grains into rotations. The other thing we really work on is the environmental aspect of it. Elimination of waste streams. So malting is a fairly simple process. There's no chemical additives or anything like that. We're using water and air to do our conversions. But we use a lot of water. And so we're working on ways to eliminate the wastewater and be able to capture the BOD. We're working with a company in Burlington on a grant through the USDA to be able to potentially turn that waste stream into something that's usable. Sustainability is a word that gets thrown around a lot, and it's something that I think we're really striving to actually do with keeping things within this circle. So we're growing the grains, we're malting them, it goes out to a brewery, and then those spent grains are usually coming back to feed animals. And of course, carbon footprint reduction. So if the malt in your beer came from Saskatchewan, it had to come here a long ways. But if it's grown just down the road, it's a lot easier to cut down on trucking costs. So when I started this, I started it out of my barn down in Moncton, and we outgrew that. We went 2 tons at a time, and we realized we needed to grow, and so the big farm here in Charlotte opened up. So that turned into a whole new set of issues. Learning to run an almost 600-acre farm is not as easy as I thought it might have been. The building itself is almost an acre in size, and it was a dairy barn. So this is part of this transitioning landscape. This is, a building that held 300 cows. It's a fairly new building, and we were able to move the house in there, but we had a lot more space needed. We needed to figure out how to heat the building, how to do that effectively. We've got solar on the roof now, so we're actually a solar-powered malt house. Being a landlord is another piece. So we've, you see, well, I should jump around here. So as a new ag maker space with the Campus for Ideas, the idea is we wanted to bring in kind of like-minded places that maybe didn't have the money to go buy a farm now, or just had a good idea that's ag-related. And so we've got some co-located businesses. One is a shrimp farm. You guys might have heard there's a shrimp farm in Vermont. It's John Brawley. He's back in our calf barn. One of the things we're working on with him is turning our waste, which is these malt culms, these rootlets, into a fish food, and keeping that in-house. We've also got a baker. Scott Medellin has slow fire baking here. And so when we're growing our grains on the property, we're milling them here for him. And then we've also got some barrel storage. One of the breweries that we work with, House Fermentology, stores their barrels here. So we get to be a landlord dealing with that sort of thing. One of the biggest challenges that we've run into is being ag in Vermont. A lot of the different state agencies don't know what to do with that and kind of don't recognize that. Figuring out permitting and regulatory issues, just it's been a constant education piece to say, hey, this is what we are. We are ag. And general maintenance. A farm this big requires constant maintenance. So to kind of focus on what has happened in the pandemic of this year. For years, I've maintained that alcohol is recession proof. We are testing that theory big time right now. So what I've always said is that when times are good, people drink, and when times are bad, people drink. And we've seen that's true, but what's happening is big beer sales are up. So craft beer losing tasting rooms and bars has really hurt. And people are buying their alcohol right now at the grocery store because you're not making separate trips to the beer store as much as you might have in the past. So that means big beer sales up, but it's still hurting local breweries and distilleries. Things picked up over the summer, but I'm sure you all are paying attention to what's going on right now. I think we're in for a rough winter. We'll see how that develops. For farmers, most of the farmers we work with, it's really business as usual because mostly they're out there, on their tractor. They're already socially isolated. So it hasn't been too much of a problem for them. But then there's also supply chain issues. There's things that have to come in from out of state. The two big things this year are cans and CO2. So lots of people are canning. Well, apparently there's an aluminum shortage. And from what I've heard, most of the can availability has already been meted out for the next 2 years. And that affects the small guy. CO2, so carbon dioxide, brewers need CO2 to brew. CO2 is a byproduct from ethanol production. Well, nobody's driving this year, right? So we're not producing as much ethanol, so there's less CO2. So we're seeing plenty of effect from that. So what does the future look like? That supply chain is important. How much can we keep in Vermont? And then how do we market Vermont? So I hear a lot of different businesses who are looking to go outside the state. We're mostly trying to keep our grain in the state. So that's always a constant piece of conversation is do you want to keep your stuff in the state, or are you counting on the Vermont name to be able to sell outside of the state? The education of farmers, including us, learning how to grow grain, learning what grains grow better here, and what that looks like. The education of consumers. So the end user, when you're buying that beer, at this point, are you saying, hey, what's in that beer? And more people are starting to think about that. And then how to control those costs. It costs more to farm in Vermont, and we know that. So how do we keep those costs down so we can compete with places outside? That's most of it. So some of the things that I just wanted to touch on briefly as I wrap up here. When you look at sizes of farms, there's a lot of the new Vermont ag is focused on meats and berry farms, vegetables, and so mostly those are smaller acreage. But when you look at that 160,000 acres in Vermont, there's a limit to how much hay you can grow, and so when you're growing, 100 acres of something, small grains is really the answer to that, I think. And it's going to be part of the big solution. And again, thanks to so many of the places in Vermont that is fostering this, thanks to the Farm to Plate group, this has been amazing. We've worked with the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, which has been invaluable in trying to figure out how to grow the business. Yankee Farm Credit is transitioning out of dairy, or not out of dairy, but in a reduced set. They're a great partner to work with. I would suggest any of you that haven't talked to them yet, please do. And then grant sources. So we're working with the Audubon Society to remove invasive species, to renew bird habitats on the property. Working with USDA and FSA. I mentioned UVM extension, which has been amazing, and the Working Lands Group as well. I think that's most of what I wanted to say. I've got plenty more. I can go on for about 2 hours, but I think I should let somebody else talk instead. So that's briefly where we are, where we're at, where we're looking to go, and what we're thinking about. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Andrew. That was such an insightful look into an up and coming business, which I'm hoping that more folks will be able to dive into. So for our last panelist today, I'm going to present to you Kat Buxton of Grow More, Waste Less and the Vermont Healthy Soils Coalition. So Kat, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. And thanks for brewing beer, making that malt for the good beer in Vermont. I really appreciate that. My name is Kat Buxton. I live with my husband of 30 years on unceded land in Abenaki territory in the White River watershed in the town called Sharon. I moved to this region in 1999 after riding my bicycle 9,000 miles around the country with my husband as a way of, that was sort of our college education, and I'm still learning from that. The mountains and the communities centered around food production here are what drew me. They called me in, and here I remain. I am endlessly inspired by the magic all around us. I'm a musician, an artist, and a complete microbe geek. My studies focus on soil and ecosystem health, community resilience, and building what I like to call the social mycelium, living in connection to each other and the world around us. I like to call myself a busy cross-pollinator, a change facilitator. My business, Grow More, Waste Less, advocates for food system change and a paradigm shift by working with individuals, schools, community groups, and statewide and national organizations to make a difference, one relationship at a time. I manage the edible schoolyard at Thetford Elementary School, weaving K-6 project-based learning into our work. I lead land listener workshops with the Soil Carbon Coalition for adults and children all over the state and throughout the country. I co-coordinate the Upper Valley Apple Corps, where we plant free for the picking fruit and nut trees in public places, largely in the Upper Valley. I serve on the board of directors for Rural Vermont, Upper Valley Food Co-op, the Vermont Healthy Soils Coalition, which I am the co-founder of, and the Soil Carbon Coalition. I also work in coalition with many individuals and groups throughout the state. The pandemic has certainly affected my work as a public educator. I spend a lot of time on this screen, as many of you do, but I also thankfully get to get out and work with schools. One school in particular in the pandemic still allows me in because I'm actually staff. The pandemic has opened up opportunities though for new projects, and I just can't seem to stop taking on new projects. We're starting to write down some of the curriculum that we've been developing around soil science and compost for middle school students. I've joined the Center for Grassroots Organizing. I am on their collective now, and that place is incredibly inspiring. It's in Marshfield, Vermont. We've started a middle school student government at Thetford Elementary, and I'm their advisor, and I learned so much from these 5th and 6th graders. And most exciting, we just launched a new project called Regeneration Corps in partnership with many groups throughout the state. You should check us out online, Regeneration Corps. We're a collaboration engaging in high school age students at the intersection of agroecology, climate change, resilience, racial justice, and equity. This has been an unimaginable year for humans and all life across the globe. The earth and all of her creatures seem to be calling for healing and liberation. In my better moments, I look to the natural world for patterns, guidance, and wisdom. With deep listening, quieting of the mind, and keen observation, I'm learning to ask better questions. I'm learning to rely less on preconceived notions. So often, what we thought was just is not so. Nature is chaos, beautiful, ordered chaos, intricate, dynamic, extremely intelligent, collaborative, interdependent chaos. She's seeking constant balance and correction with simultaneous brutal indifference and joyous abundance. Rejuvenation of life is inevitable. The extractive nature of humans is well documented. It has led to a decline in global biodiversity, soil health, water quality, air quality, social fabric, and our collective mental and physical health. Taking a bird's eye view of historical human patterns suggests that we are now on the brink of civilization collapse. Some say we'll be consumed by our military. Some say we're on the verge of the 6th greatest mass extinction, or possibly just the extinction of the human race. Ecosystems respond to disturbance, to correct imbalances. Biological evolution is a natural succession, starting with bare ground and moving through stages of growth, seed, weed, shrub, tree, adapting as conditions change, seeking balance in relationship and right relationship to all other beings. We're learning that diversity is a key to the correction of imbalances in our ecosystems, on our farms, in our guts, in our hearts. Intricate, dynamic, extremely intelligent, collaborative, interdependent layers upon layers of diversity, of biodiversity, beautiful, chaotic diversity. Check out Christine Jones. Dr. Christine Jones has a YouTube video out there called Quorum Sensing. It is so powerful. In the world of soil health, we're learning that massive diversity of species can be a tipping point in ecosystem function, leading to improved soil and water quality and all cycles. We're developing an understanding that plants are farmers too. They farm sunshine and water and microbes. Plants eat microbes. They can teach us how to grow healthier food and soil. Check out the research on rhizology. I think I said that right. From plant pathologist Dr. James White of Rutgers University. I just watched his webinar the other day and I'm outrageously inspired. The unseen are the drivers of all life. The biological workers like bacteria, bees, and fungi selflessly work in collaboration for the greater good of all. These unseen heroes are everywhere. We're learning about the mycelium, vast microscopic fungal networks that hold our landscapes together. There are billions of microbes in every single tablespoon of healthy soil, and miles of fungal hyphae. Every living thing is covered with microbes. Good ones, bad ones, indifferent ones. We have no idea what most of these creatures are, never mind what they do in the world. And they all do something. With dizzying diversity and inspiring collaboration, somehow it all works out. It's magic. Our good science and our thinking, policies, and ideas of knowledge and ownership and control have left out the unseen workers in our human communities too. I put forward that the same lack of diversity in ecosystems that has contributed to a decline in overall climate health extends to the colonialist version of human communities that we live in today. White spaces dominate the human landscape. We, white people, think that we own 98% of the land. With our grand ideas of ownership, leadership, and best management practices, we've created the conditions for massive ecological decline. Have we, and our vastly expanding ignorance, created barriers to our own evolution by leaving out the unseen heroes? Those who unintentionally enable the wasteful and extractive lives of the few. The term essential worker comes to mind. The unseen biological heroes are fragile. Disturbance destroys them. Tillage, fertilizers, pesticides, antibacterial products, our fear of dirt and fungus, and overuse of antibacterial products. Volcanoes, flooding, hurricanes, tornadoes, fires, these are all types of disturbance too. And disturbance leads to rejuvenation, to correction, to adaptations. Thankfully, microbes are super resilient and can regenerate quickly when the conditions allow. Did you know that trees and plants can talk? This excites me to no end. Vast fungal networks called mycelium stretch infinitely through the landscapes, holding everything together and connecting all life. I want to be like the trees, to work collaboratively in support of all life that supports me. In my work and in that of the Vermont Healthy Soils Coalition, we like to think of ourselves as building the social mycelium, the human connections needed to survive and thrive. It's about building meaningful relationships to leverage our collective power, our intelligence, and our ignorance. In this pandemic year, my community supported me through extremely difficult times. I had to stop working in March to take care of my father full-time when I rescued him from an independent living facility. And then a couple of months later, I lost him and then my mother just 4 weeks after that. During all of this, I never felt alone. I never felt like I wasn't going to be cared for. The social mycelium growing from the work that I do in the world supported me. And it's helped me to feel like I'm on the right track. As we learn, or as we unlearn what we thought life was, I wonder what it will take for us to realize our place in ecosystems. We are all so connected. We need each other. Our collective liberation depends on our connectivity and our interdependence. Soil is our soul. It's the dust from which we're made. Stardust and microbes. Isn't it exciting? The principles of soil health are very simple in concept. They're old knowledge, repurposed, backed by science. Interpreted together in the context of time and place, they're a helpful framework to understand how ecosystems function, no matter where you are on Earth. We often get stuck on the parts. We over-specialize, we become reductionist, we forget to pan out to the bird's eye view. Focusing on wholes rather than parts helps us to listen to and work with the land, creating conditions for thriving ecosystems while meeting our landscape goals. I've applied these soil health principles to my soul health for my own self-care. They help to ground me, they help me to check my ego and to listen more deeply. By reconnecting to our roots and feeding the biome of life on Earth, we too can be restored. We can rejuvenate and become resilient. We can check our egos. We can build our collective power to shift behaviors. We can stay grounded in the joy of being a critical and infinitesimal part of life. We are more divided than ever in this society. We're blinded by ignorance, false pride, false wealth, egos, misinformation, and the fear of our planet dying, or rather, rejecting humans. We have so much work to do to create opportunities for thriving livelihood for future generations of bugs and plants, birds and fish, bacteria and fungi, frogs, animals, and humans. I am learning to ask better questions and to focus less on answers. Answers often blind us and become barriers to innovation and ingenuity. All of our greatest science and policy and answers have still led us to a climate emergency. How good could our answers be with that outcome? So in closing, I'll leave you with some questions that we shouldn't have to necessarily answer, but hopefully they help us to ask even better questions. Can we collectively learn to build connections and build upon those connections? Can we listen to the land while quieting our minds? Can we de-emphasize humans and grow our humanity? Can we think in wholes and not become divided by very important reductionist issues? Can we focus on the whole elephant in the room? Can we put those who are most affected in the lead? Can we adapt and evolve? Can we unlearn, reconnect, recreate? Can we bind ourselves in our collective liberation? Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kat. We really appreciate you sharing that that perspective, and honestly, a big thank you to everybody on this panel for sharing their perspective. You're getting standing ovations in offices, home offices across the state right now. So thank you again. So for these last 20 minutes, I'm going to ask some questions that have been posed to the panelists. If you could try to keep your responses to a reasonable amount of time, we'll get as many as we can in. Then we're going to be closing out the questioning at 2:25. To our attendees, if you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. So I am going to start with Amber and Naomi. We had a question come in from Eric DeLuca at Leverage Point Consulting. He asks, how does Susu Community Farm envision and frame its business model? Is the assumption that revenue and farm products will not be directly connected? Are education and philanthropy the assumed primary sources of revenue? Are there others?
Thank you for the question, Eric. So we currently have a fiscal sponsor who is the Retreat Farm in Brattleboro, and so we are planning to be a nonprofit, a 501c3. So like how we were talking about our CSA is a free program, so that would be funded by philanthropy and grants and things like that. And then we also will have some of the programs Naomi was speaking to, like the trauma conscious liberation and things like that. That would also be a revenue stream for the farm. But yeah, mostly we're thinking that it will be education and philanthropy.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amber. Naomi, I just want to make sure, do you have anything that you wanted to add? Okay. For our next question, we have this question is going to be for Andrew. It comes in from Maddie Kempner. She writes, I'm curious if Andrew has any thoughts about how policy changes can support more farmers transitioning to growing grain for human consumption, or what else would be helpful in moving us in that direction.
Yeah, that's a complicated question because there's a lot of different angles that it could be attacked. One of the things that I've been advocating is farm brewer legislation. So restrictions, obviously a lot of us are on conserved farms as we are, so anything that we're doing has to be deemed agricultural. And the idea of having farm brewer legislation, one of the biggest things I'd like to see is essentially an incentive paid back to farmers to effectively lower the cost of growing grains in Vermont. Growing small grains in Vermont is not a commodity. I mean, I think any kind of vegetable, berry, anything like that, it's not a commodity in Vermont. We're not competing with the prices in Iowa and South Dakota. Barley right now from out west is 7 to 8 cents a pound. We're paying our Vermont farmers 20 cents a pound. So that immediately puts us in a situation where our malt is going to be more expensive as a premium product, and that's fine. But I would love to be able to see the farmers be able to increase that, because at 20 cents a pound, we're not making farmers rich. We're hopefully being part of their plan for sustainability going forward. And being able to help that would make a lot of sense. For me, the way I see that financing happening is with the explosion of craft beer and craft spirits in Vermont, you've got all this tax revenue that was not coming into the state that goes to the state now to the DLC. So they've had this massive increase that has come about because of these great Vermont breweries. Why not spend some of that back and keep it in the local economy and keeping it with farmers? That's probably the major piece of legislation right now I'd love to see.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for offering that. And for our next question, we're going to go to Erica. This question is coming in from Regina Beidler at Organic Valley. She asks, Erica, would you be willing to expand on your comments of how to elevate the training and work of butchers and abattoir workers as a profession, and how educational institutions can assist in that effort? Man, I'm having flashbacks to reading as a kid in front of the class. So I'm going to leave that to you, Erica.
Okay. Yeah, great. That's a great question. I know for, some of the things I spoke about, like the young woman in France, Marjorie, like they had a very, their local schools, people took tracks, right? You either were taking a track that sent you to college, and she chose this very specific track that was going to take her into butchery. That's what she wanted. And at 15, 16 years old, she chose that for herself to go down that road. And then she found the Chapullards to go and apprentice with, basically, and they took her on. And she was actually one of, she's one of the most beautiful, like butchers I've ever been able to, not physically beautiful. I'm just saying she is just so smooth in her actions and no wasted movements. She was just amazing to watch, and I learned a lot from her as well. And I think that what we could do in this state is, butchery and meat processing is almost a very nuanced craft. It's not something that's just cut and dry. It's not something that you just learn once and then, you move on. It's an ever changing, like different even in our small farms, different farms, the meat cuts different than it does from farm to farm because of what those pigs are eating or how they're being raised, you know, the environment that they're growing in. And so I believe that we could use people like a small business like mine, probably in the next year. I feel like in the last 4 years, I haven't had the bandwidth to take on anyone. Luckily, I have an employee that's incredibly forgiving of me, you know, and has worked with me to learn this craft. But I feel like someone like my business could take on a student that would be willing to want to learn this, that wants to feel like this could be something that they would like to do. We could take them in, let them begin to learn those nuances, let them begin to work in this craft, learn some of the traditions that have been passed on from generations to generation, and continue this artisanal work that we're doing. You know, we're trying to keep as much of our stuff like handmade as we can, because we honor those traditions that have been passed down, you know, European traditions that have been passed down from family member to family member. We want to continue to honor those. And I think we could be a part of that. I think we could set up this system, whether it's butchery, whether it's preserves, whether it's, you know, running you know, CSAs, whatever people want to learn. I think that if we work together, we can create those communities to help one another.
Thank you so much, Erica. And then a question for you, Kat. With many of the panelists spoke about this renewed focus on food systems and local food. As an educator and someone who spends a lot of time working to educate, how do you think we in Vermont can maintain that enthusiasm? And then how can we help those who are first discovering this for the first time really see the Vermont food system and the resiliency that it has been bringing forward?
Well, it just want to take me right into the kindergarten room when I work with little kids. It's about our senses, you know, it's about connecting with the planet that feeds us. And not everybody wants to be a farmer or even grow plants. I don't understand it, but it's true. They don't all want to do that. And that's okay, but taste, you know, that's a sense too. Nourishment, it's nourishment. And I think it has to do with access and really putting those who are most affected first. That's how we do it. I think I just want to make it clear that we don't do that. The people who are most affected take leadership and we follow, because I think that's the only way. We have just really messed it up. It's time to change. And, you know, good food and good soil is where it's at. That's where our souls get fed. That's where all beings on this planet get food from nutrients, from sunshine, from plants, from soil. I'm gonna leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you. So kind of along those lines, we had a question come in earlier, and this one is for Amber and Naomi. It's more of a question along the, the phases that you identified here in Vermont, and someone was asking a little bit more about that spectrum that you identify. Would you care to elaborate a little bit more on that inclusion, diversity, inclusion, equity, and liberation spectrum, and how we can continue to move towards that here in the Vermont food system?
Sure. I think also that like phase thing is also kind of like a universal, I guess not universal, but it's something that happens not just in the food system, but in all systems where, you know, if we look at the phases we've gone through, there's been diversity. And one of the definitions we talk about, which is something that was shared with us by Resma Menachem, who wrote My Grandmother's Hands, is he shared like his definitions of diversity and inclusion, where diversity is, what are we diverting from? What are we trying to get away from? We're trying to avoid and get away from, you know, white supremacy, capitalism, all these violent structures that we just want to avoid. And we're avoiding them by bringing in Black and brown people to be like, look, see, there's Black and brown people here. Everything's good. And then, you know, the phase of, then after that, we've moved into this phase of inclusion where but like, what are we including too? You know, in inclusion, when we talk about that, we're talking about bringing people into a structure and an environment that is inherently racist. We haven't talked about, you know, like shifting the culture, like what does it actually look like to create a space where all of these people are safe, where all of these people's voices are heard, where all of these people have agency and power and really important roles and needs are being met. And then, you know, we've gone into the phases of equality, which is really giving everybody the same thing. And we've talked about equity, which is kind of noticing that the same is not the same for everybody. You know, like we all need different things in order for us all to thrive. And then what we talk about, you know, something that we talk about is after all those phases come liberation. And I'm sure after liberation, when we have like the children that are coming after us will have something even better and they'll be like, liberation is super racist. But, you know, in the phase of liberation, what we're talking about is creating a culture where all people can thrive and all beings can thrive and all beings' needs are met and everyone is abundantly resourced. And I think there's many things that need to happen to get to that point. And I think the things that Kat was just speaking about really kind of point to that and include, you know, really resourced white organizations being in leadership roles when they have no analysis on white supremacy, culture, and capitalism and all of these things. That doesn't work because they're in a learning process. So they're trying to lead everybody else in something they don't know. And why are we doing it that way when we have so many indigenous people, so many Black people, so many people of color who have been doing this their entire lives for generations, know how to do this, know how to protect and care for the earth? Why don't we just let go of our need to like maintain power and control and money and just really build community, build relationship, follow these, you know, all of us to thrive and realize that a lot of us, even when we have these power positions, are not even happy and our needs aren't even met. So why don't we create a culture where that can happen? And Naomi, maybe there's something you could add to that about like how we get there with that.
I mean, the only thing that I would add is to say that how we get there is to trust Black people, trust brown people, to put us in positions of leadership, to trust that we know what we're doing, to trust that most of the systems we're talking about come from our cultures. We're talking about reparations and we're talking about land back.
Thank you so much for that insight. You see Kat's spirit fingers. I think other people are probably waving them as well. We had another question come in, and this could be for all the panelists, and it's from Mari Shift. They ask, how could a reformed apprenticeship system in the agriculture system could be made accessible to low-income learners or even people outside of the family network? So I'm going to throw that to Erica here first, because you had mentioned something along these lines, and then I will invite anybody else to join in as well, as I know you're all working relatively in these fields.
Yeah, I think that's a good question and one that we could all work on to collaborate with to create the answer to. Do you know what I mean? I feel like just as, you know, when we start talking about some of these systems that we have in place in collaboration, we need to make sure that that encompasses everyone, you know, not just, so it would be low income learners and people outside of the network. We need to make sure that everyone has access to that. I mean, you know, this business, my business anyway, takes, you know, I feel like it takes a certain amount of resiliency. You know, you have, it's hard work. It's hard work on your body. Most people that farm know that, know what that's like. And I think it takes just a willingness to learn and show up and be there. And I think that all of that would be things that you can be successful, you know. And so I would be willing to hear what other people have to say. I think it's something that we could all collaborate on to work together. So if anyone else has other thoughts, I'd love to hear them.
Thanks, Erica. Kat, Andrew, Amber, Naomi.
I'll add, I wrote it in the chat too. I think apprenticing is a fabulous idea. I worry a little bit that it could be based on an extractive nature. And as long as that's not done, I think it's a wonderful opportunity to share skills. And it also connects largely with a project that we've just launched called Regeneration Corps. And that's just regenerationcorps.org. We just launched this fall in the Upper Valley region. It's super exciting. These high school kids are loving it and thriving. The pandemic created the opportunity to launch this program that we had been working on developing for a couple of years. And it doesn't quite encompass apprenticeships, but I certainly think that it could. Yeah, bravo, great idea. Let's share our skills.
And I would just add one more thing, Shane. I think that it also just like, it has to carry some weight as well. Do you know what I mean? It just doesn't, it needs to have some kind of like certification behind it. It from maybe one of our, either our higher, our colleges and universities, our community college, or within our high schools. I think kids need to know, or people need to know when they do these apprenticeships, they are getting something, a certificate out of it. And we would hope that they would stay in Vermont and continue to work in our food systems, but that certificate could then go if they left Vermont, they would be able to take this with them and say, look what I did. This is what I've done. This is the things that I can do. I'm good at this. I'm a master at this. And, we would need to get some other people on board so that they go around, because my kind of butchery is different than, this other person, person's kind of butchery. Like what I'm going to teach them is vastly different than what the next person down the road is going to teach them. So, and having that shared experiences with a lot of different people, but then having the weight of a certificate is really important, I think.
That's a really good point. Thanks, Erica. Amber, Naomi, or Andrew, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just pipe up real quick. I guess, in an industry such as mine with malting, you don't run into people who say, hey, what I'm going to do? I want to be a maltster. We've met with some local high schools and some teachers and discussed ideas about bringing kids out, obviously not during COVID now, but to show them and get them motivated through VTC and UVM Extension. We've got a lot of people who are learning to love these things in the agricultural world. And so having a good functioning apprentice system to bring people in. And, I'd love to see 5 malt houses in the state of Vermont. Being the only one, I'm the education committee for everybody. So maybe I should be looking at the younger generation to come on in.
Wonderful. Well, folks, we are at our time. I just want to give, again, a big hearty thank you to all our panelists, not only for sharing their stories, but sharing their time and their perspective. This was a really inspirational, at least for me, hour and a half. So again, thank you. And I imagine everybody's just like celebrating again in their home offices. So with that being said, I'm going to give it back to our Farm to Plate director, Jake Claro. And he is going to usher us into the next part of the gathering.
Whoa, there I am. Actually, before we do move on, I wanted to, there's a great question from actually Becca Warren. And I want to also say Becca Warren is a part of the Farm to Plate team. She has been leading the writing and editing process of the briefs, and I neglected to mention her name in the introduction, so I apologize for that. She has been essential to this. But the question she asked, I think, is a really good one for Naomi and Amber, and I'm curious kind of to hear the response on this, so I'm willing to let this go for a few more minutes. So Naomi and Amber, the question was that she said, I've seen the two of you speak, and that you're appearing together. This seems like a wonderful living example of shared leadership. I want to hear how you think about this intentionally, assuming that you do, and if you're willing to kind of share just how kind of you approach that shared leadership.
Sure, thank you for that question. I'll try to answer it really quickly and short. That's definitely a huge thing that we think about all of the time, and that we're always in the process of working with together. And, you know, I think a big part of it is that we prioritize culture over policy. We prioritize our relationship in community, you know, like with our people, over rules and regulations and all of these other things. So a lot of how shared leadership looks and works for us is us getting to know each other. Like, what are your needs, and like, how do you want to show up in the world? How can I support you in that, and vice versa? And developing our leadership in a really kind of somatic, embodied, and collective way that I think just, you know, that's where we're at now. But I think there's a lot of ways that we continue to work towards that.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you to all the panelists here. Just a number of really powerful messages. I know I've I've almost come to tears at certain points, which I didn't imagine happening through a virtual gathering. So I'm really just blown away by the work that all of you are doing. And and I think it really does speak, you know, to some of both the hard truths that we've got to recognize and reconcile, and also the optimism and hope, you know, that I think we're working towards. So thank you so much. And so now there's kind of a break period here. I'm going to post in the chat that we are expecting you to get to your breakouts by 2:45. You can find the Zoom links to the breakout that you've signed up for in the agenda. And as we're breaking, we're going to have some little trivia pieces put up on the screen for you to enjoy. And just take a break, take a breather, get what you need, and just please do try to be back at those sessions at 2:45. And then I do want to say too that at the end of the sessions, we do plan to come back as a big full group to see everyone at 5, share our reflections from our sessions and from the day. So please stick with us till 5:20 today. Don't leave early. I think it's really important and valuable for us to get back together as a full group. So thank you so much. And and we'll go to break and see you, maybe some of you in a breakout session. All right.